Lo-Fi Horror Guys Growing on You Live Season 11 is sponsored by All In Merchandise. Bam! All In Merch is your source for the finest band merch from early hardcore to up-and-coming bands. All In is the go-to. Each item is developed with the artist and decorated with care in upstate New York by folks, cats that love the music and they love the scene. You know what I'm saying? Proceeds are issued directly back to the artists. Order your merch at allinmerch.com and support your favorite band. 3, 2, 1. What's going on, everybody? It's your boy, the Lo-Fi Horror Guy. Welcome to another episode of the Lo-Fi Horror Guys Growing on You Live. Today, I'm going to be having on my dude, Mike P. Nelson. Oh, I'm so excited. This is going to be really cool. I recently got to have him on. We're talking Wrong Turn. Today, we're going to be talking all the more. Let's dig a little bit more into more that my dude Mike has to offer. Get him plugged in. Let's see here. Mike!
There he is.
Thank you. There we go. Sometimes the fun with this stuff is the technology. You know what I'm saying? Just trying to figure out some of these goofy things.
Oh, I know. Like had I known I needed to update Instagram, I would have had that ready to rock and roll. But apologies. But I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all that counts. That's all that counts. Thank you so much once again for your time. This is so awesome. And I am very excited for this, man. This is going to be a fun little set, a fun little interview here.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, so here on Growing on You Live, on a typical episode, what we do is I have a couple of intro questions, then the remainder of the interview is about you and your craft, and then I have one finale that I wrote just for you, my man. So if you're all comfy, you're all ready, we're going to dig right in.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. So first off, let me ask you, just off the top of your head, you don't have to dig in too much. You don't have to think too much. If you could watch The Domestics and Wrong Turn in a drive-in theater as a double feature, what other movies would you have playing with the movies? So first off, let's say The Domestics. What would you want to see in the theater with The Domestics as a double feature?
Original Mad Max.
I love
the original one. Like, because that I mean, honestly,
say no more.
Yeah, that was the one that was like that inspired me to do the movie. I mean, overall, it was that and The Warriors. So honestly, if it was a triple feature, which I mean, that's at our Valley High here in Minnesota, they do triple features. So you go in, I think it's like $10, $15, you get 3 movies or something like that. It would have to be Domestics, Warriors, and Mad Max for sure.
God, I love that. Okay, next up, Wrong Turn. If you could have any other double or triple feature, what would you have playing with Wrong Turn?
Oh, man. I would say I would have to go, let's see, Wrong Turn, Temple of Doom, and and this one's gonna seem really well. Actually, Twilight. Yeah. Okay. So Temple of Doom, Wrong Turn, and Deliverance.
Oh my God, I love that. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
That
so
is
you have a little
pairing.
Yeah, a little taste. I mean, Temple of Doom, I know, is such a weird thing, but it's an adventure movie, and New Wrong Turn is an adventure movie, and Deliverance is an adventure movie, and it's 2 movies that were really both heavily inspired me when we made the movie. So
I love that. That's awesome. Next up, let me ask you, as far as because with doing something like a remake, sometimes it kind of draws a little bit of attention of people asking different things like, hey, if you could remake this, or if you could do something. Let me ask you, as far as if you could remake something of your own, something that you did early on in your career that maybe you could bring to a new light and, bring the knowledge and technology that you have accessible to you today. What would you remake of your own today to bring to the big picture?
Let's see here. I think it'd be fun to do a if I went back to doing if I did the GI or something like that. We're talking movies that I've done, it could be a short or something like that, in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It'd be really fun to do a bigger, just take an approach to the GI, the whole idea of the monsters of war take no prisoners kind of idea, where it's literally just some sort of creature. And actually, there's something that there's this idea that I have floating around in my head that it might not be like your traditional monster, but I've always wanted to do a vehicular horror movie, and I've always felt like it'd be cool to do a vehicular horror film, but in a war setting. And so, like,
Oh.
I think,
Huh.
it's like, yeah, I could have like the Yeti monster like taking down, both, Nazi and American soldiers or something like that in World War II, or do you like set up and like do a movie about like the conflict in Kosovo, or like the Bosnians, Serbian kind of conflict, and have like this weird, almost like this ghost car, this thing that like takes out people from both sides, like the war is over, but the war, but it still lingers, and that's what this like car is that goes through these small towns and just starts taking people out, and they're like, whose side is it? And it's trying to get the war started again. You know what I mean? But then they realize then the both sides have to like team up to go after it. I like those very simple classic, the opposing sides have to join forces and realize that they have a common enemy that they have to make things stop. So
Oh my God! What
so
a great
that'd be
answer.
something that like I maybe I'd take that idea of the GI, but then I'd like turn it into something like less monster, and turn it into something like a vehicular horror. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Damn. Okay, okay. I love that too. We're gonna dig into the GI as well in some of your earlier features, but I wanted to ask that, and I love that I couldn't have gotten a better answer. So I'm just gonna leave that there and leave that cut and dry. That's beautiful. Thank you. As far as in our first interview, you'd mentioned a love for horror movies, and a lot of horror movies, being scarier in what you built up in your head rather than what they were when you actually watched them. What
Yep.
were some movies that actually scared you? When you watch them, you're like, oh. Yeah, that took it there.
I would have to. So one of the scariest movies that I remember seeing, and I think it holds up to a certain extent. But I think it was definitely the age that I was, and I think that sort of fear still like resonates in me. Was Fire in the Sky.
Oh yes,
Um,
yes.
and there's something about like alien movies and abductions, and just the fact that like, whereas like alien abduction movies almost kind of feel like ghost movies in a way, where it's like you have no control.
Mm-hmm.
You have no control. There's so much, whatever being it is, it's so, I want to say it's so much more advanced than you are, and it's one step or maybe even 10 steps ahead of you. And just the fact that, like, I mean, the Fire in the Sky thing, like my dad and I would always watch that TV show Sightings, which was kind of like this almost very tabloidish kind of like show about like supernatural phenomenons.
Hmm.
And it was on during like the news hour. I think it was like 5 or 4:30 on like channel 23 or something like that. It was, and we would watch that. I think it was on like once a week, like every Wednesday or something like that. We always watch it, and I always had the spookiest stories. I always talk about like the people who saw a Wendigo, or people who saw a Sasquatch, or people a guy who said he was abducted by aliens. And so those always freaked me out. So then like when a movie like Fire in the Sky came out, I was like, my dad and I went to go see it, and we were scared. I mean, even my dad was scared. I remember being there watching this movie with him, and we were just like, and like we were terrified. And that literally that instilled a lot of fears in me as a young person. Like I still have that weird, uneasy, tingly feeling when that stuff gets talked about. Um, and yeah, so that I'd say was definitely one of those. You know, it's not even a movie necessarily, but like another thing that well, I don't know. I'm just trying to think. So let's say Fire in the Sky. Did you say like three or two or just like one? What was? Sorry, I get ahead of myself sometimes.
Just some movies, just as far as ones that actually did scare you, that were absolutely about the hype.
You know, so as I said before, I think in the first interview, so I wasn't allowed to watch a lot of the super crazy scary stuff when I was younger. I started watching more of that like uh when I was about 17 or 18, like when it was, I guess, legal for me to see an R-rated movie, because like at that point, my parents were kind of like, well, when you're that age, you can watch whatever you want, but be careful. And I'm just like, okay, whatever. Um, and but growing up, like in that age where you're very what's the word, like everything you watch is like very much imprinted on your brain. Another one was I mean, Temple of Doom scared the crap out of me, and like I always felt so uncomfortable watching that movie. Again, like it left a really strong impression on me. You know, a heart getting ripped out of a guy's chest, he's still alive. You have to watch him get burned alive. You know, you have this hero that like has basically turns to this dark side, and like, you know, he like punches this kid. Like, it's a really intense movie, and I can't live down some of those images.
Oh yeah.
And then I'd say two more that really did something to me were Monster Squad and then Twilight Zone the movie. Monster Squad, just because like I was so familiar with Dracula, Wolfman, Frankenstein, Mummy, Creature from the Black Lagoon. Like those are the movies that I was able to watch growing up. But then this movie made all those monsters really mean. You know,
right.
and like I'll never forget, like, you know, you know, Rudy like shooting those vampire girls in the chest with like a bow and arrow, and like it's like kids killing monsters, and you're just kind of like, oh. And like, you know, Dracula like locking up those college girls in the closet, and like Wolfman like in that phone booth, like, he's gonna kill your son, and he's like choking up all this phlegm. It's you know, it's not like, you know, the hardcore, you know, stuff that you know from the 70s, or you know, the Texas Chainsaw stuff or Hills Have Eyes kind of vibe. But like for me, because I was familiar with that kind of thing, as something that was safe, as something that, you know, was allowed in the house, like you can watch Dracula, you can watch Frankenstein, that's fine. That was really shocking to me. And again, like it made me, as a young person who really wanted to make movies eventually, like want to push the envelope, you know, for things that like maybe felt safe. And I wanted to surprise you, you know what I mean? So that really stuck in my head. And then of course Twilight Zone the movie, which, you know, I mean, I loved every episode in there. You know, I think, you know, the one that, you know, everybody gravitates towards a lot is the George Miller episode with John Lithgow on the plane. Because that's just like the one that you can't get that one on your head. But the one that I think scared me the most, I liked that one the most. I had the most fun with the Joe Dante one. The Steven Spielberg one is kind of like, you know, it makes you feel warm and cozy. But we're talking horror here. And it's the Vic Morrow one, man. Like that one chilled me to the bone. And I always remember, you know, watching that. You know, it was a PG movie, so I could watch it. And I just remember watching it and just feeling so trapped. Situation, and it was because of his own bigotry, and you're just kind of like, oh, like you're like, oh my gosh. And I remember him, like the things that he said, and they're super racist, and you're just, as a young person, you're like, oh my gosh, like he shouldn't be saying those things. Like you're just like, and then what he has to experience, you know, like, you know, Nazi Germany, you know, a cross burning, you know, being like looked at as the other side in Vietnam, and like it's really wild and super challenging, and like especially like as a young person who you're just starting to understand some of those ideas and what real bad things went on in the world, and that's scary. It's super scary. And the fact that like he gets pulled away on the train at the end and his friends are right outside, that's the part that always killed me, is his buddies are right out there like, where'd he go? And you're just like, he's right there. God! Like it's just, you're just screaming at it because it's oh man. Anyway, those are definitely ones. I get chills just even talking about it, but those are definitely the ones.
Okay, I love it. Yeah, and certainly I can't agree anymore. You know, as far as asking from, you know, when along with when you were a young man, what were some irrational fears that developed from watching scary movies that, you know, it was like maybe just walking down the steps and thinking that, you know, there's somebody behind you, or, you know, the leprechaun, or, oh, I mean, maybe not the leprechaun being younger, but what were some irrational fears, and how'd you get over those things?
Okay, so I think the biggest one, and this is definitely one of the earlier ones that I had, and it was, I think it was because of movies, but it was also because of certain things that were in my house. So my dad used to own. So my dad was not so much anymore, but he used to collect military stuff from like World War I and World War II. And so we had like, you know, patches and knives and, you know, helmets and, you know, masks and all these, you know, all this cool stuff that he'd like, put all over the walls in his kind of workspace, and it was really cool. Like, I mean, it was just fun stuff to look at. Whenever you go down there, you go down, you'd show your friends, like, look at this cool stuff, man. Like, and he also had two mannequins that had, I think one of the mannequins had my great grandfather's World War I uniform on it.
Oh.
And the other one, I don't remember what the other one had on it, but it might have been like my grandpa's World War II uniform. I can't remember exactly, but whenever you go down there, you'd see them. They'd be in the corner, they'd be sitting there, and they'd be like sitting there looking that dead stare, and like it's always so weird to look at them because they're like, you know, they look, you know, they're fake, but like there's just that like they're just so odd. And I remember being, so it was in my parents' first house, which I was only there until I think the age of 4 because we moved out of that house when I just turned 5. So I have very vivid memories of walking downstairs and seeing these things and being scared. I remember shooting one with a BB gun once, like just because I didn't like it. Because so like my dad had this like, you know, like a Red Ryder BB gun. I remember like shooting it in the neck, and I remember, I mean, just recently, like, you know, this was just a couple of years ago when I was at my parents' house, like looking, and the hole that was in the neck was still there from me shooting the pellet into its neck. And I remember doing that very young. And then, but I would have dreams. I'd have dreams, and there was the two mannequins, and there was the one that was always scarier than the other. There was one that kind of looked like a good guy and one that looked like a bad guy. And I remember the bad guy one would just like suddenly just kind of come alive and just start walking towards me, and I'd be running up the stairs, but I couldn't, you know, get up the stairs fast enough, and he'd be getting closer, and then the other one would come after the other one and try to stop him. It was terrifying.
Oh my God.
So there was that, and then I think the other thing that like, and I don't know if this came from movies or whatever. I mean, I would say the alien thing was definitely a huge freaky thing. Like you'd be outside, you know, out in the woods, hanging out with your friends, going camping or whatever. You always just get the chills. Like if you just even think about what if we saw like a light in the woods, you know, and went towards it, and then we saw something we shouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that was maybe, it was an irrational fear that it was like a dream thing that like I always get freaked out, were stairs. I'd have these dreams where I'd get to the top of a staircase, I'd look down, and I'd just jump. And then I'd hit the floor, and then I'd just wake up, and then I'd fall back asleep, and it'd do the same thing. It was just like this constant thing. So again, I don't know if if that's like a weird like psychology thing or whatever, or if that was from movies, but I remember those things were definitely things that scared me and stuff like that. And I think also too, like if you look into a dark space and like let's say you look like down like a staircase. Mm-hmm. A lot of stair things. I don't know, like mannequins chasing me upstairs, jumping upstairs. But like you look down or you look into a corner, and actually James Wan always gets me with this with his movies, is looking into like a corner and it's so dark that you can't see what's in the corner, but you feel that there's something in that corner. Mm-hmm. That drives me absolutely crazy. Like I just get the chills. It just prickly fear up and down. And I don't know if that's because there is actually something there, or if my mind is just completely playing tricks on me, but that is the pitch blackness and not being able to see what's in pitch blackness. And not that it's like a void of like, you know, the world around you where, you know, there's space to run. It's you're in a house and you look into your bathroom before the light turns on, and you're just like, there's something in there. I can keep going. and you're almost too scared to even turn the light on. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. That just drives me nuts.
I love that. That is so funny. I mean, that's so true too. And I don't know if it's just something set on from like watching movies, but I just recently watched something. It was on Shudder. It's called Z. Have you heard of that movie?
No.
Just the letter Z. It plays a lot on those types of things. It's about this little kid who has an imaginary friend and just slowly is like haunting the family. And there's a lot of that type of shit where it's like just a doorway with a really dark room and you're kind of like peering in. There's some good stuff in that. If you get a chance to check that one out, that's pretty good. It's funny you bring that up because I just watched it a few days ago. So
okay, Z. I'm definitely gonna put that down. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. For sure. All right. So as far as when you were going to the video stores, you're going to a video rental. You're scanning the aisles, and you know you have something catch you from just the cover art. What were some movies that you picked solely off the cover art or the poster art?
So again, you know, when video rental stores were in their full swing, I still really wasn't old enough to like go, because I mean, granted, you know, blockbusters were still around like when I was in college and stuff like that. So I mean, I would still go and look at movies, and that's when I could actually pick one out. I do have more. I think a lot of the movies that I went back when I was older and picked out from the video rental store were because of when I was younger and I'd sneak away to the horror section. And one of the big ones that I remember wanting to get. And so I'm gonna tell you, these are gonna be ones that I wanted to get. Like, these are the movies that I wanted to rent, but I couldn't. And I'm wearing the shirt for one right now. It's Extra.
Nice. Oh my God, that shirt's sick too.
Yeah, and there was something just about like a monster with red eyes, and like, not to mention like it's about a little kid, and you know, like, I was a little kid, and I always remember thinking to myself, I'm just like, how did they get a little kid to be in an R-rated movie? I don't understand it. Like, it didn't make sense. I was just like, if my folks were like, you know, these movies are so bad, you can't, you know, rot your mind with these things. And I'm like, but there's this kid in this movie. How does that work? And so I never quite understood that concept, but you know, you also realize that it's like, well, everybody's got, you know, different points of view. And so Extra was definitely one. There was a movie called Star Crystal, which was like this this alien one that had this really great cover. It's not a very good movie, but I eventually got to rent it from a Video Update, I believe was the name of the store, which was awesome. And yeah, it has this like slimy, like alien head on the front with like a spaceship underneath. It's like the classic 80s art that like made the movie look so cool and like super creepy, and then it ends up being like super slow and lame.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, even outside of horror, though, you know, there was things like Star Wars. You mentioned Indiana Jones. You know, some of the cover arts and some of the, you know, the poster work for that type of stuff. You know, the action adventure stuff was really, really cool too. You know, it was kind of, I think it's getting back toward that, you know, with horror and different things. But for a long time, you know, it was, you know, a draw. You know, it was like an art piece. You know, even outside of, you know, science fiction, different things.
But that was the thing. Like, I mean, when you went to a video store, you were going to a gallery.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that was such a great, and we're lucky enough to have, we have like one of the last video stores, I think, in the country here. Like, I know there's a sprinkling of them, but like, we have a Video Universe up in our small city here, and like just in a strip mall, and it's so awesome and dusty and like and like, you know, it's, you just walk, and I was able to take my son there, so like he got the experience, and they're still kicking, like they're still rocking and rolling.
Yeah.
And but like, yeah, you go through, and like you literally just, you get to go through and you get to see all the artwork that, you know, that was. And, you know, I know they sort of do it with like streaming titles now and stuff like that, where like you get to scan through the artwork, but there's nothing, it's not the same as like, it is like when you go to like an art gallery and you see all the work like in person. It's different than going to like, it's like the difference. And I'm going to go here. Now you just wait, I'm going to go here. It's the difference between like going to the Louvre and seeing the Mona Lisa, and going, or, you know, or going to the video store and seeing the beat up VHS case for Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's a completely different experience. You know, you can skim through the movie titles on HBO Max or Netflix, but in most of those are all redone anyway. They've like updated them for like, you know, the Generation Z or whatever they think people want, you know, because I honestly feel like if we reverted back and like put all the old artwork back on, people would be so much more interested, because some of the artwork now is so dang cheesy, especially like the updates of all these things. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And another thing too that was always fun and frustrating about the video store was there's always that one movie that you wanted, and every time you went there, the tape was gone. You know what I'm saying? You always fall into that frustration. You're like, you know, I didn't know if I really even wanted it, but every damn time I go to the video store, it's gone. I know I need it now. It's just, that's the first thing I go to, and it's gone every time. And then you finally get it, and then, you know, it's like, it was all right.
Like, I mean, I remember looking at, like, I remember seeing the box for Clockwork Orange, whenever we were skimming through, and I was always like, what is this about? I even remember I never even saw the movie, and I remember I drew Alex, like I drew a caricature version of Alex with the knife and like the eyelash, and like, like he had the knife, and like there was like, I didn't know necessarily what like the whole eyeball thing was about, but I just like drew an eyeball with him. Like, it's a weird, like, it didn't make any sense. It was super kind of, abstract and out there. It was like, like it was in a triangle, but then I finally realized that the triangle is for A Clockwork Orange. Like, super. I mean, again, like, people made, it was fine art, man. Like, these cases were just wonderful, and they spoke volumes of what they wanted you to feel, from the movie that was in that plastic shell.
Yeah, totally. I love that. And I mean, we have a couple of video stores here still too. So, we can kind of experience that, and the kids and everything too, which is a really cool thing. And it's unfortunate, for those that can't, but as far as, all the movies that you've seen all these years, let me ask you, if you could have any one prop from any movie ever, may it be horror or not, what would you have for your own personal collection?
I mean, I think I'd love the freaking giant ass pumpkin head suit that I could just get in and walk around with.
Things as tall as the house is.
I know, like, I mean, it wouldn't fit in our house, but like, I would just love to be able to like have that thing and like jump in that thing like during Halloween and walk around our yard with it. Like, that would be so cool. I mean, I guess like that would be like, that'd be like that big item that I was like, I'm gonna leave it at that. There's plenty of things that I would love to have, but like, I'm gonna go nuts and just say, just the pumpkin head suit, man.
That's awesome. That is very, very awesome. I love that. As far as your earlier work, so let's kind of dig into some of that. Last time I had you on, we talked specifically Wrong Turn. I did a little bit of a digging into, some of the shorts that I hadn't seen. I'd seen some of your stuff, the domestics, a couple of the shorts, the GI. But first off, I wanted to touch on the GI. And just as far as, what knowledge from school, were you able to bring right off the bat from the project? And what did you learn in the process of making the GI?
That was the one project that I realized how important sound was for film. It was also the project that I realized how much I liked doing sound, because that was like a huge part of the start of my career was working in sound design and Foley. It was, I think that was the main thing was just, it was a film that I'd shot it on color 16 millimeter. It was the first, not the first film I'd shot on film, but it was the first film that like I'd shot it on film, got, brought it to like the DI and like, got color work done on it. I had seen Private Ryan, so I kind of wanted it to have like that sort of like desaturated feel. And, I also learned, about, because I was also trying to like make it like how Spielberg did like that really stuttery kind of motion, but I couldn't figure that out. And I did so much research about like how cameras did that. And like with a buddy of mine, this Ben Trandom and I, who helped me make the film, we were trying to figure that out. And we realized, you got to change the shutter angle on the camera. We realized that the ARRIS like film cameras that we had, you couldn't do that. And so we're like, okay, so we can't do that. And so we just tried to, do the best we could. And we were trying to do stuff in post, and we couldn't get that to work. So it's, we learned about how all these other filmmakers did these things, because I don't even think like on the behind the scenes of Private Ryan, like it even got into like how they did that necessarily per se. So like we had to just kind of dig around. And at that point, like not everything was on the internet at that point. You had to like really dig deep and try to figure out like, and then we got down to it where we were watching on the behind the scenes, and Ben had found like, I think it's this thing called shutter angle, because look at like on each camera, they had like 45 and 90 and 180. They had like pieces of tape. I was like, that's like the 45-degree angle. That's the 90-degree angle. And so, yeah, I mean, that's super like film nerd like talking stuff, but like, but that, I mean, and that's what we did. We did a ton of that stuff then with Wrong Turn. Like that was like a huge thing that I wanted to do with Wrong Turn, and so that's kind of where that whole thing started. But yeah, I mean, honestly, like that getting into like, you know, trying to understand lenses, which we didn't at that time. It was just like, you know, there were 3 lenses on that ARES that you could like spin around and like quickly like, you know, get to one lens and like, oh, we want more of a close up. And I was looking more at the lens of like, oh, there's a wide, so we're going to shoot wide shots with this. Oh, this is a 50 mil, so we're going to shoot close-ups with this. That's all I based it on.
Okay.
You know, it wasn't like, you know, I wasn't thinking like, oh, you could shoot like a cooler, wider shot with a 50 millimeter lens and like, you know, do a close-up and like let the background all fall out of focus. Like I wasn't thinking that way. I was just thinking like super practical, shoot this movie fast. It's 10 degrees outside. We're in the snow. The camera's freezing up. We have a guy in a giant like monster suit, you know, running around in the snow. Everybody's cold. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, learned a lot from that, and you know, then of course it did a lot of experimentation with the sound and you know, making the monster sounds and you know, recording real guns firing and you know, and that's where again like a lot of love of Foley and stuff like that came into that, and what you can do to create all those sounds. It's just a blast.
That is one thing I can say, and I want to touch on a couple of different things as far as, first off, with the sound of it, you know, there's different things that you see that, you know, it might not be a Saving Private Ryan or Thin Red Line or, you know, like a big, huge budget, you know, war movie. But that was the one thing that really threw me, though, like when I went back and watched it a couple of times, was like, all this shit sounds like it's really happening right around these guys. And I just kind of was wondering, like, what was that process? Because it sounded, you know, so much more authentic than a lot of other things that I'm seeing, you know, even with a huge budget, you know, and you mentioned the Foley and the sound department with that. That's cool. I like that's a cool detail.
You know, we did, you know, we had to figure out how to do things, you know, on the fly, and we were, you know, like, so a lot of it was like, and this is, I mean, I think, you know, a lot of movies that have more time are able to do this, but like, you know, for us, you know, it was just sort of, you know, in the moment, this is the way we thought we should do it. And that was, you know, we recorded like some of the voices. Well, so first of all, we didn't have all the effects budget to like show everybody getting shot and squibs going off. So a lot of that we had to do off screen. And it was about like, you know, can we like, you know, record some of these guns like from a distance? So like, you know, we would, you know, put the microphone and the gun would be, you know, really far away, and then we'd, you know, roll sound, and then, you know, pop, 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 pop. And you hear that, you know, you would have like people yelling and screaming. So then you'd have like, we record people like yelling and screaming in German and in American close up. And then we'd have them go far away, and we'd also record that. And so it was just like, because you can create that effect in post with like, you know, reverbs and echo effects and all that stuff in post, but you're never going to make it sound exactly like it would, like if you're like recording it that way.
Yeah.
And I love recording stuff. Like I love actually recording stuff the way that, you know, it plays on screen. I always find that there's a really interesting result, and I don't think a ton of movies do that. I remember being super inspired by like, I don't know if this movie came out by this time, but it was afterwards. But like when Peter Jackson was recording sounds for Lord of the Rings, and he'd record sounds, and then he'd take those sounds, put them on really good speakers, and put them in like stone castle tunnels and stuff like that, and then re-record them again in that space. And I always was super inspired by that. Like that, like you could make these sounds sound even cooler by doing that kind of re-recording and stuff like that. So I played a little bit like around with that, where like I'd go into a bathroom and like re-record something that was on a speaker and like have it play in the bathroom to get like a crazy amount of like reverb and echo that maybe I didn't have like the ability to do so much in the programs, because I wasn't as skilled, you know, to do that stuff. But you know, it's the poor man's version, and ultimately it sounds real because it's real.
Dang, okay. I love that. That's awesome. You know, that was one of the first things that jumped out to me, was just how, you know, I think it's one of those things too where you don't realize it until you see something like that, where you're like, man, this sounds like all this stuff is really happening like right around them. Like, I wonder what was the process into that. So I love that. That's awesome details to hear. And, you know, a really, really cool thing. You had mentioned now your dad's, you know, collection of war and different memorabilia. Did any of that show up in the GI?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Nice.
A
Okay.
lot of the helmets. The guy, we a buddy, a family friend of ours, we shot on his land up north. And he was a military collector, and so we used some of his stuff.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, majority, with the exception of like a couple of like German coats, because we weren't able to either find those or use those because they were way too valuable and they didn't want to get them ruined.
Mm.
Um, we put these gray coats on, but that looked very, very similar. Like, I mean, unless you're like a super big collector of those things, you're not gonna know the difference. But
Mm.
yeah, I mean, those, like, I think the German helmets that we had, those were real, actual German helmets from World War II, and the
Mm.
American stuff was all authentic. Um, yeah, no, and I think even the uniforms too, like or like some of the coats and stuff like that. Like, I think one of the coats. Well, like, if you look on the patch on the corporal, the main guy that we followed, the corporal, on his shoulder, it's the insignia of the rolling W's, I think it was called, and that was the insignia that my grandfather wore because he was in World War II, and he
Oh,
was
wow.
he was a machine, I think he was a machine gunner or a bazooka guy or something like that, one of the two. But like, that was his patch, and it was in my dad's collection, and so we used that patch. So just a fun little pieces of information. But like, that was all,
Yeah, I
a
love
lot of
that.
that stuff I would say was like 75% like actually all authentic stuff, and anything else to fill
Dang.
in the gaps was repro or something.
Dang. Wow. That's awesome. That was really, really cool. What about next up? I wanted to touch on as far as flashlight. What was a little bit of your inspiration going into that and the utilization, or so it seemed, of everything being practical lighting?
I mean, a buddy of mine, Troy McCall, he's an awesome filmmaker, and we met in college, and he him and we were going up to my parents' cabin. This was, I can't remember when we did that movie. It was like 2007 or something. Like, it was a while ago, and we started talking about like things that scare us in the car ride up, and Troy was like, man, wouldn't it be scary if like you got like trapped, stuck on the road, and like somebody like would come out of the woods with a flashlight and you couldn't see who it was, but they just sort of messed with you. I was like, that's amazing. That's so scary. And they were like, we should make that, and like, we should do it this weekend. Okay. And so like, we literally just like found a great desolate side of the road, like near our cabin, and just like, it was just me, him, and then my brother Andrew, and we just went out there. We bought a mammoth smoke to like put in under the hood to like make the radiator seem like it went.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and we had a flashlight, and literally that's all we lit the movie with, was just I think it was two flashlights, because there was one point where I'm inside the car and we needed to be like the dome light was on, and I think
Mhm.
like my brother was like holding a flashlight on like a piece of white paper as like a bounce card or something like that. And that
Okay.
was giving me just a little bit of push. But then after that, it was literally just like, again, it was just like, it was putting like little flashlights or stuff like that in like the hood to give me a little bit of bounce. And then that flashlight in the distance that like would like rim me, and like, and then turn off and turn on, and it got closer and closer. And then in the car, that was all it was just flashlight kind of going by, and like, you'd see my face kind of going dark, and then out, and then in the light, and then dark. And then we went in the trunk. It was again another flashlight that we used, that we just put a red gel on, because he's really great at cinematography, and so he had like junk in his uh some junk in his trunk, uh, and uh, and some film stuff, and like, he had a piece of red gel, and for putting on lights. We put on the flashlight and just like stuck that in the trunk, and it worked great to like make it feel like part of the car light was like shining through, just to give me a little bit of light so you could see what was going on. It's
Uh,
just
I love that. That is awesome. That is awesome. That was really cool. It was so simple, and just, you know, as far as even the approach, but then I thought it was so cool because it was, you know, not a whole lot going on, but so effective. And then that was one thing where it was like, man, the light, you know, there's not like a bunch of things beaming down. Like it just felt kind of suffocating in a sense. You know, you're just trapped with these people in this situation. So, or with you essentially, right? It was just you.
Yeah. And like I said, it was just me. And then my brother was the flashlight guy for most of it. And then when he walks around the car, then that's when I had the camera on the inside. And then that was Troy, like, you know, putting his hand in on the window and, like, you know, feeling the edge of the window with his finger and, like, walking around. And just so we had a little bit more height because he was a lot taller. And
nice.
Yeah, it was fun stuff.
Love that. Next up, I wanted to touch on The Goodbye. So this was a short. It was 2015. Does that sound about right? Was it 2015? The Goodbye, the short, was that around when that was released?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so this was basically like there was so much going on, and that was one of the things where initially there's a desktop folder that gets opened up. There's a bunch of different screenplay names, different things. First of all, I wanted to ask if any of those were based on something that you had actually written or had started, and you know, if those were any stories behind those.
You know what? So I can't remember if I tucked a couple of my own things in there, but those names of those scripts are actually all written in the script by the writer. Like, that was really? Like, so the writer of the script of The Goodbye, because I didn't write it, like I did, like, I think I did a couple little tweaks to it, but like, you know, you know, for the most part, like, you know, this was the writer, the writer's script, and a lot of those were in that script. And then, you know, some of them, I think me and Nick Junkersfeld, who shot Wrong Turn, he also, you know, shot this. And I think for the most part, like, we also just came up with some weird names, like, on the fly. Like, it was just kind of like, yeah. So, I mean,
like Tiger Tank and Ninja Bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah, so I know, I think Ninja Bullshit that's a scripted thing, because that was like the script that he actually opens up, and it's like the two ninjas like fighting out in the woods.
Right. Okay. The Sensitive Cowboy, I think, was one that
but like, if you
cried too.
but if you watch, like, all those screenplay names, with the exception, I think, of Tiger Tank and a couple, all those characters end up showing up in the movie.
The intermingling there. Yeah. It was
so really... I think some of that had to do with, like, you know, what was cool about it is the writer had sort of planned to, like, you know, he knew, like, he wanted some of these characters to, like, you know, to show up, like, in the waiting room, and actually the characters showing up later on in the end, like, that was something that, like, we filled that out too, and like, this would be such a cool place to, like, bring all the characters back and come and have everything go full circle, and we had a blast doing that. So, and that was fun to bring those characters that normally feel like just throwaway characters in a movie, just because, you know, you can put a character in, like, you could actually then, like, close out all these characters' different stories in, like, these small little vignettes at the end. And that was one of the things that excited me the most about the story, was all these characters that, again, like, are normally throwaways. You can just, like, you get to revisit them again and give them the time of day, you know, and, like, they normally don't get. Like, if you can imagine, like, going to, like, Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi and being like, let's see the whole story behind Yak Face or a Man for a day. Like, what does that look like? What did they do, like, when the palace closed down? Like, did they go somewhere to, like, did they go and sleep? Or did they, like, leave the palace and they come back the next morning to get some beer? Like, what did they, you know? Like, I love that kind of stuff. Like, the little awesome side characters, and I don't know.
That was one thing too, because there was so much going on, and it was difficult as far as at first to think, like, where is this going to go? Like, how is this going to, you know, come together? And there was so much happening, but that was the beauty of that. And, you know, even more so in being a short was just the fact of that, you know, by the end, you know, it felt so satisfying. You know, you're sitting there and you're like, that felt complete somehow.
I know it's
insane.
It's a little zany, and, you know, I think we all knew that was, that it wasn't going to be an easy, task to kind of make it, all succinct. But like, I think, for the most part, we pulled it off, at least the best we could. So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, not knocking it at all. I dug that one. That one was really cool, and it was, like I say too. Sometimes shorts, it's difficult with within the time frame, but seeing something like that with so much going on was definitely inspiring, as far as somebody who's trying to start off a career and thinking they can start it off with doing shorts, and then pulling something off like that, bravo.
And I think too, what was good about it is, it's about keeping that main thread. You know what I mean? I think as long as you can stay focused on the main thread of the story, which was, you have a writer who's trying to finish the script and a girl who wants to get her story finished. You know what I mean? Like, and when those merge, you know what I mean? Like, there's so much going on around it. But like, if you can stay focused on, like, this is a love story, this is about love lost, like, that's where, when it all connects and it all comes together, you're like, oh, this feels complete now, and I think that was, as long as we didn't deviate from that, and we stayed that course, then you get to have that fun at the end with everybody and all these characters that kind of come back together again and stuff like that. And then you get that payoff.
Totally. Yep. Definitely. I can't agree more. And that's something good, I think, for people that are just starting out, or different friends that I have that are just starting in filmmaking and things, to take those things in mind, as far as the core characters or core story, and kind of building around it and making sure. So I like that. That's very very, very good knowledge to drop. Next up, I wanted to ask about both the short and the feature of this bad boy here, The Domestics. I've been waiting on my page to post on that just for today to kind of hype up the episode and such. But God, what a cool movie, and certainly as far as post-apocalyptic, a different approach, a different payoff, different type of characters. Wild. First of all, asking about, the short and maybe even the feature. Can you tell us about the process of naming and characterizing each separate gang? What all went into that? This might be a little while, so if you want to paraphrase even.
Yeah, no. I mean, honestly, that just came down to having a lot of fun. Like, I mean, I remember like writing down a bunch of names. I mean, so this was a project that I had started kind of figuring out and trying to get off the ground. I think the first stuff that I wrote down for it was in January of 2013. And just like on a small scrap of paper, which, by the way, I found that small scrap of paper, like I think it was a year or two ago, just like tucked in a bunch of papers. It was just wedged between like stuff that was probably going to get thrown away. And I found it. And it literally has like, damn it, I wish I had. It's around here somewhere. Hold on a second. I'll keep talking. But like, I literally I found this piece of paper, and it had so many, and not so many, but like it had all sorts of these, a lot of the ideas that actually came to be in the actual movie.
Oh man.
Let's see here. Oh wait, this is it. Yes. Okay.
Oh,
so,
nice.
As you can see, like I have this whole like giant ass like binder that's like all just domestics stuff. Like I have like the slate thing, that I put on the thing, and then like there's like there's like cool stuff that like cast members like gave me and crew members gave me, and then you have like the cool like the director's chair back thing that like
nice.
This was like the coolest. Like we didn't even do this for Wrong Turn, but like for your first feature, and then you get like a freaking chair back, like that's pretty but yeah, so like really really cool things. Like I think Sonoya Mizuno, she gave me a there's so many guns in the movie, so she literally gave me a cookie cutter in the shape of a gun as like a parting gift. It was pretty funny. Anyway,
I love that.
But yeah, like look at like, so you have like this thing. This was like the very very first page that I wrote. There was big guy versus husband, much like Indiana Jones versus the bald Nazi, which is the Willie and the Big Secret.
Oh my God!
Cannibal
so
family
cool.
takes husband and wife in husband and wife end up helping them. Like some of this is like honestly a little bit different than what it turned out to be. But they realize that they've been eating human flesh. Car chase shootout, captured by marauders, forced to play Russian roulette with each other. Find a garage full of old cars, steal one. You know, I don't like
That's
it.
so cool.
Anyway, so like that was literally like the first page that I of anything domestics that I had written down, and yeah, it was
That is amazing. Now, was that written before you did the short then?
yes.
Oh, okay. Because in the short, they don't have anything about the cannibalism, right? They don't eat
No.
anything. That came in the feature.
Well, see, so the short was originally supposed to be I wanted to make a like a web series. So the short, that short was actually going to be like I think it was episodes 1 and 2. Like I was going to split it apart and make it 2 episodes. And this was sort of like I was in the early stages already thinking about like what the episodes would be and what they would end up seeing or encountering on their journey. So the first story was basically in the short, which is in the short it's a little different because they're not necessarily on the road, they're just like at this house and they're just hanging out there. But like it was to run in with these nailers, and that sort of follows that in the feature a little bit, except they're on the road and they have to crash at this house.
Okay.
You know, some of that difference comes from just, you know, when we were talking with the studio, you know, there was this idea of like, you know, is it too much of a chamber piece just for it all to take place at this house? And, you know, nothing's moving forward. We want them to move forward. We want them to keep going towards something. And so like, okay, well, maybe we can turn it into a road movie and still kind of, you know, keep these same stories. But ultimately, like the path that I created for the web series ended up sort of being what the feature ended up being, you know. And we you know, and if you watch the feature, you can kind of feel a little bit of an episodic kind of vibe to it. Like there's, you know, it's very like, it has a kind of a chunked out feel where like they go through all these kind of scenarios. And that's kind of why I think it feels like that, you know, for better or for worse. Because in terms of the gangs, honestly, it was just having fun and like being inspired by, you know, the gangs that, you know, were in other movies. You know, Nailers being like a very straight up throwback to like Mad Max and Road Warrior and that kind of stuff. And you know, the Plowboys kind of being a little bit more like a Warriors group. The Gamblers, you know, the whole idea with the Gamblers was that it's a group of people who were basically like more poverty stricken, or like, you know, they were the poor, low income people who now can have all the money they want, even though even though money is useless to everybody else. Like to them, it's like God, you know, just like the guy says, money's the only God you have left. Like now they basically worship money because they can have as much of it as they want. So, and then you have Willie and the Big, which is basically like me making like a psychotic Pee Wee Herman, and kind of doing like a different take on the whole Zed's dead baby kind of like.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, like I think everybody that saw that movie was heavily affected by that moment, and I wasn't gonna make a moment like that just because it's not my vibe. But to create that feeling where you're just like, oh god. So, and then, you know, it ends up being something that I feel more, you know, attached to, which is that bald Nazi fight in Raiders, where the guy's like, you know, he put up the dukes, and, you know, I even do it where like, you know, Tyler in the movie, like, you know, kicks him between the legs first. You know, he plays dirty. He bites his arm. And what was really cool about that was our stunt coordinator was Nick Gillard, who was a stunt player on those Indiana Jones films.
Oh wow, no kidding.
Yeah, and he's also the guy who created the lightsaber fighting techniques for the prequel, the Star Wars prequels. And dude, and Nick and I, oh man, that guy was great. We still keep in touch, and he's literally one of the coolest dudes
Dang,
God.
that
So,
rocks.
so being able to say like, I'd like this to happen like this movie. Oh yeah, by the way, you were in that movie.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Jeez, yeah.
he's the guy in Last Crusade that like puts up the periscope on the tank and he's looking around, and then Indiana Jones's face goes right up, and then he's like, "He's Americana, see Calvin the Fiber," and then Indiana Jones kicks the thing and it like hits him in the back of the. That's Nick. That's freaking Nick, man.
Holy crap! Wow.
And so like when I got
That's
to meet him and
hilarious.
like found that like all the stuff, of course, that he'd been a part of, and that he was like, "I love this script, Mike. I want to do this movie." And I was like, "Oh,
Yeah,
dang, this is
let's
so cool."
let's do it.
Yeah. So anyway, that was
Wow.
a little side note, but you know, that's
I love that. That's awesome. That is so, so cool. If we could touch on Crazy Al, if I
oh
could
yeah.
ask you if Crazy Al's radio station being KILU, which I love because I didn't catch it at first, and then I watched it with the captions on, and I was like, okay, all right, I see. I like that. What would be 5 bands that would be on a regular rotation on Crazy Al's KILU? What would you say?
Let's see here. I'm going to pull out. So let's say, so probably the chiffons for sure. Oh yeah, Jan and Dean, 100%. Oh man, like anything Phil Spector, man, anything Phil Spector.
It's amazing.
Let's see here. Oh man, Puddin' and Tane by the Alley Cats. Like the thing about Crazy Al's a doo-wop guy. So like, you know, he's gonna be playing like that classic doo-wop from the early '60s. He would not be playing Beatles.
Man,
Did you
love
did you
that.
catch the KILU reference in Wrong Turn then?
I didn't.
So
Oh no.
Matthew Modine at the very beginning of the movie when he's driving in the car, you hear a jingle that we actually had made for Wrong Turn specifically because we're not in the apocalypse yet. But he's going into the small town of Virginia, and you hear Oldies 99.2 KILU, and so
Oh my
we actually
God.
had somebody like sing the jingle and create the jingle. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, all this stuff is, you know, Keep on Dancing by the Gentrys. I'm telling you, like, he would play all this kind of cool. Cool stuff, and it would all be like, the thing is like I always picture Crazy Al like, you know, he's spinning records, man. Like he's legitimately like, he's got like, you know, stacks of 45s, and he's just like, you know, pulling them out, and he's like, all right, oh, this one's beat to shit. Oh, we got Bobby B coming up, you know, and like he's just like pulling them off the wall, and he's just, oh man, like super cool stuff.
Man, I love that. That's awesome. That is awesome. I did not catch that. I'm gonna have to go back now that you say the jingle. I can hear it, and I know exactly the scene that you're talking about referencing. But I didn't catch that when I was watching that. So
It's a little just a little Easter egg in there.
I love that. I love that. That's awesome. That's awesome.
And then also, Mila has a tattoo of the cherry behind her ear, which is it's the cherry symbol from Domestics.
Yeah. Okay.
It's basically the same symbol that Sonoya wears on her uniform in Domestics that we put behind Mila's ear.
Boy, oh boy. Look,
it's all connected somehow.
I had all of these questions already set, and then now I'm like, oh boy, I'm about to start veering off track here. Okay, all right, let's leave to the stuff that I have, because
yes,
I don't know. If anything, I mean, I'm sure, you know, the next thing that you have coming out, I'm gonna have you back on, and I'm gonna see all the more shit with all the other times I watch these movies. Dear Lord, that is awesome. Nick Leisenheimer scoring the short, Nathan Barr scoring the feature, correct? Mm-hmm. On for the Domestics. Tell us about the conversations that you had with them, inspiring the direction that you were looking for, and what they brought to each, you know, themselves.
I mean, I think the biggest note overall was creating the sounds, like the sonic musical sounds of each kind of gang. Was sort of one of the main ideas. You know, obviously we went in and played around with a lot of things, and I brought a lot of references for them to to listen to. And but I remember, like, with the short, you know, it was about, you know, making, you know, I didn't want it to feel too electronic-y. I wanted it to, if there was anything that was that you know, that was more processed, that it felt very, had kind of more of a softer analog grunge feel to it, you know, something metallic-y that, you know, was like the Nailers. And then, you know, I passed along that same information to Nate, you know, when we were doing Nailer stuff. And a huge inspiration for the music was uh, from a movie called High Tension, which, funny enough,
Oh, yes.
was shot by Maxime Alexander, who also shot The Domestics.
The cinematographer.
And so what was cool about that whole situation was we were looking for a cinematographer. I was trying to get Nick at the time, because he had shot the short to shoot it, and MGM wouldn't have it because I was the first time feature filmmaker, and they were like, oh, we gotta pair him up with somebody who's kind of more of a veteran. So he's got to find other names that he wants to work with. And so I was definitely bummed out about that, because like Nick and I we share a shorthand, and there's just a really, you know, strong connection there. But, you know, we're going through these lists of people, you know, we're interviewing people, talking to different DPs and stuff. And I remember Maxime's name come up. I'm like, oh my God, I'm telling you, High Tension, like, you know, say what you want about it. Maybe the ending's not perfect, you know, maybe, you know, whatever. But that was such an inspiring movie, both visually and sonically for me, because I had never seen or heard a slasher film quite like that before. Like like, and I know that was kind of like the French new wave horror kind of thing that was coming out in the early 2000s, and I never seen anything like that before. It was just mind blowing. I remember seeing the trailer for it and just being like, just completely blown away. And I saw the film, and it changed everything. It changed like how I wanted to sound design every film that I made, how I wanted to shoot every film that I made. Like it was. And so then when I got to talk to Maxime on the phone and explain to him, you know, because he saw the short, and I was explaining to him, like, remember when I did this part in the short? Yeah, that was because of High Tension. He goes, oh, I know. he goes, I could see that you were very inspired by those moments. Like, you know, like in the short, like the hand, like rubbing across the chair and like feeling for the dust is like the thing of, like, you know, the mechanic guy going into the bathroom and feeling the sink and then touching under the faucet. Like, he's insanely smart. And then of course picking up the hair on the chair, which made it into the feature as well. Like all these little nuances that like that movie did, and it made that villain so methodical and smart. But yeah, then of course Maxine got to shoot it, so like that was cool. And Nathan Barr. So then, you know, so Nick and I kind of had, Nick Leisenheimer and I for the short kind of had this, you know, this idea of what we wanted. Then going to Nathan Barr for the feature, it was like, you know, it brought some of those same things. Wanted to give each kind of character their own thing. Like the Plowboys kind of had this kind of harmonica kind of like thing that was like this pitch down that goes, but like it's the sound of a harmonica, you know. Betsy has this like vibe where it's like the pluck of two strings, like boom, bing, and like immediately you know what you know that she's some shit's going down, like Betsy's gonna get up. And so it was about like finding these sonic bits that make you feel something on the first viewing, but ultimately then when you watch it again, it's that feeling of like knowing what's about to become, and or what's going to happen, or, you know, that feeling of dread, or that feeling like, oh yeah, you know, that build up those sonic clues. So much fun.
Totally. I love that. I guess continuing on with scoring, as far as with your newest movie, Wrong Turn, Steven, is it Lukic? Is that his last name?
Lukacs.
Lukacs. Okay. Working with Steven Lukacs, tell us about you know, some of your direction into going into Wrong Turn. You know, what were some things that, you know, you had in mind, and some things that he brought to the table?
You know, Steven actually was working with Nathan Barr while I was doing Domestics with Nathan. So Steven was an assistant for Nate.
Oh, okay.
And that's how I met him, actually. And I went back to Nathan for him to do the score for Wrong Turn, but Nathan was really busy. He was doing like, I don't know, like 2 movies and 2 TV shows, and he just didn't have the time to do it. And so he was like, but you should maybe reach out to Steven, because I don't know if you remember, but Steven actually did a couple of the tracks in Domestics. And I was like, oh, that's right. And one of the tracks that I really liked in Domestics was one that Steven did, and it was the music when Tyler Hoechlin is walking up, and he finds Lance and his son tied up, and Willie comes out. It's this like very unnerving,
okay.
and it's like there's a lot. It's very simple. It's very minimal, but it's full of dread. And I really liked the sounds that he was able to create in that. And so I was like, oh yeah, no, Steven knows what's going on. Okay, I was like, so I reached out, and we just it was just at first, because I wasn't out in LA the whole time for doing the score with Steven. We did a lot of it remotely. And so there was so much of it that it was about discovering the language for the movie, and it was doing that remotely, which was challenging, at the start. But what really helped was when I did get to go out and actually sit in the room with him for I think it was 2 or 3 days. And this was pre-pandemic. This was like that February before everything went down. Mm-hmm. And we were able to just like hang out and like play with instruments and make sounds. And I could show him, like, being in the room with a composer is one of the best possible things you can do. I mean, obviously you can get it done remotely, and it'll probably turn out fine. But like being in the room, playing with things, finding sounds, like that was the majority of what we did. Like while I was there, we recorded some stuff, but so much of it was just playing around and just like scraping giant bass strings and throwing things and hitting things and having these weird sounds on his Moog keyboard. Like he would hit a sound and then like do some weird, I don't even know what it's called. Like he'd hit the dials on it and like it would keep going, and then he'd hit something else and then it would resonate. And like he was like playing with like real things with like a keyboard. I don't even know what it all was necessarily, but we were just making cool sounds.
Totally,
and that's what it came down to, was like it was reference, making cool sounds, and playing around until finally he found the sound that I was sort of going for. And then in that, then Steven was able to come up with a whole bunch of really weird, crazy stuff that were that even went beyond my notes that are in the movie, and that were, wow, like I was not expecting this, but like he had this cool like heart flutter sound that always plays in the background. It's like this, but like when everything goes down, there's always that little like feeling of like you again, like your gut is fluttering, you're feeling like this is bad, this is really bad. And like that was something that he came up with, and I was like, that's the thing, man, we need that. So like that plays itself throughout so much of the movie. And yeah, and then of course we play with that idea of like I love the T2 score, and one of my favorite character sonic character pieces that signifies a villain or characters in general is the T1000.
Yes.
You just, again, like that was sort of like the thing like with Betsy in Domestics. Like we wanted to give her that kind of thing where like that wasn't that, but like a thing where like, oh shit, here she comes. T1000 had that thing, but like I always loved that, like, and so like we wanted to play with that. Like so I did some of that with Domestics too. Like I wanted to do that bend down just because I wanted to rip off T1000. But like in Wrong Turn, I was like, okay, so I also want to do that. But then when we get to the Foundation, I want to do it the other way, because like that, that's sort of the normal, like that's like the horror. Then when we get to Foundation and we walk in that courtroom, it goes the other way. It goes.
Oh, right. Okay.
And then we kind of went like the way of like an Elmer Bernstein or Charles Bernstein, like honestly, one of the things was Ghostbusters, like that string, like whenever they see slime in Ghostbusters, it's always like,
oh yeah, okay. Yeah.
That was kind of like, and that always signified to me like something otherworldly in that movie. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
when I saw ghosts, or like sometimes when like with like Gozer was like behind that door or something, like you would always have that weird string bend, and I always made me feel uncomfortable. And I was like, that needs to be there, because now we're used to a sound for the movie up until this point, but now when we're coming in the foundation, and now that string bend has got to go up, and it kind of makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck. Like that was sort of the hope,
Totally.
or at least the idea behind it. So
Yeah, totally, totally. I love that. You know, and that's something too with like Wrong Turn Upon, like the first time that I had watched it, is along with some of the minor details and some of the things, just visually and as well, just sonically, there was so much that was going on that drew me back to, you know, going back and looking at it. And, you know, I've followed Steven and I've reached out to him as far as having him on the show. Did an absolutely great job. You know, I like, that's one thing I truly appreciate more and more as I get older and more of a fan, you know, of the whole process of filmmaking. You know, not only, you know, I love the directors, I love the actors, but, you know, the people that are making the effects happen, the people that are scoring these things. You know, so many times there's some movies where the score is its own damn character. You know, it's like,
yep.
you listen to that and it's like you start hearing these shrill sounds or, you know, note bends. It's like, something's coming. I don't have to see it. I know this. I know this shit. I know that sound.
Yep, I know. Oh, it's so fun. It's so fun to play with that stuff.
I love that. Now, as far as with Matthew Modine's daughter Ruby, she sang the finale track, correct? How did that come about?
So while we were shooting the driving stuff with Matt, we weren't recording any audio, I don't think. So he was like, "Hey man, can I just turn on some music?" And we were all like, "Yeah, sure." So I'm in the car with Alex Elkins, who was our camera op, and Jeff Storrs, who was our AC. And we're just sitting there and listening to music, and he puts on this artist, and I'm like, "Who is this?" And he goes, "Oh, it's my daughter." I'm like, "Who's your daughter?" "Ruby Modine." And I'm like, "Ruby Modine." I'm like, "Why do I know that name?" And I'm like, and then, you know, he starts talking like, "Oh yeah, she was in, you know, she's a you know, music artist. She's an actress." I'm like, "What has she been in?" Well, the last thing she was in was Happy Death Day. I'm like, "Wait a second, that's your daughter?" I was like, I had no idea. Like, I didn't put it together, but I was like, that makes, okay. And now everything's connecting. And I was like, but she's an incredible vocal artist. And I was like, wow, her stuff is really good. It's like, it's smoky, it's breathy, it's haunting. And, you know, I was kind of like, this is really cool. And so I, like, you know, I made a mental note and I started listening to it. And when we were in the editing room, Tom Elkins and then our assistant editor, Clayton Condit, put "This Land Is Your Land," the Woody Guthrie version, at the end of the movie, in like the first assembly cut that I'd seen. And I really liked like the fact that song played. And it felt good, and it was slightly comical, slightly creepy, but like, you know, it didn't quite feel like completely, it felt a little bit like just placed. It didn't feel like it exactly sort of cinched up. And so you know, we were talking about it, and, you know, we were having some issue, you know, getting, you know, rights to it, and then suddenly it was like, well, I was like, wait a second. I was like, you know, you have, you know, Jen, she's our final girl, and like, would it mean more? Would it feel better for her to, like, for us to have maybe that song, but, you know, have a female vocalist, you know, sing this? And I remember we started talking about it. I'm like, what about Ruby? And everybody's like, what? And then James, our producer, was like, oh man, that's a great idea. Like, I can reach out. I can reach out to Matt, and we can see if, you know, if we can get her on board and stuff. And I didn't think they reached out to me. I think they just went right to Ruby, and I got in touch with her, and we started talking, and she started like recording vocals and like kind of getting like a vibe that, you know, I was going for. And she, you know, she nailed it, recorded the song. And I mean, we recorded like a full on, like, an original track for Wrong Turn. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Damn.
You know? And so, yeah, and then it was fun. It was fun working with her. And I think right now she's in the midst of like, she's going to release that track as a single here, hopefully soon. So.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, and it was so funny too. I mean, very similar to, I guess your reaction was, you know, I'm listening to it, I'm like, good Lord. Like, it was so haunting, but yet something that could put me to sleep and
Hmm.
possibly
Hmm.
give me nightmares, or
Yeah.
give me the best dreams of my life. I don't know. But it was beautiful, and then it was all of a sudden I'm looking and it says, sang by, I see Ruby Modine on the credits there online. I'm
Yeah.
like, Ruby Modine, okay. And I look and oh, she was in Satanic Panic, she was in Happy
Yep.
Death. Oh, sweet. That's really, really cool. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, the lead actor is Matthew Modine. That's her daughter. I'm like, what the hell is happening right now?
And
It's
that's,
like, oh my God, that's so crazy.
but honestly, like had I not listened to her in the car with Matthew when we were shooting that stuff, I probably wouldn't have known. Like that
Love it.
was that
That's awesome.
so he basically introduced me to her, like through her music, and then it was just kind of like it all was just kind of like, wow, like this would be a chance to, like, not only make like an actual like track for the movie, but like she's got the right vibe. And actually, it was
Mm-hmm.
a song that she did that I heard, as Tears Go By, which was a remake
Oh, yeah.
of a 60s track, and that was actually the track that, like, I put it at the beginning or at the end of the movie just to see how it felt, and I was like, this is the sound, this is the sound that I want. And so that's kind of like how that all worked out.
Wow, I love that. That's awesome. And along with that, it was such a cool wrap to the movie in general. A cool wrap to the story was just kind of, all the things that this is when you finally see the title card, which was, like, that was kind of weird that none of this happened at the beginning of the movie, and so, but
Hmm.
then, it was such a beautiful, beautiful yet, dark and haunting ending, to where I think the song really fit the whole vibe well, and and the environment that was happening with it. So yeah, bravo, that's sick, and that's awesome, as far as the story behind how that all came together too. That's cool. I love
Yeah,
that.
it's fun.
So this is wrapping up our interview, my man. I have now taken up more than the time once again than I even allotted and asked. So I really appreciate. I do have one finale question, but this is your opportunity as far as just to let everybody know maybe what you have going on. Pitching some new things coming up with Wrong Turn here as far as different releases or merchandise or anything. This is all you, my man. Thank you.
Working. I got a few. Let's just say I got a few irons in the fire for next projects, and
Ooh, okay.
they're all they're all very they're all spooky things, for lack of a better term. So
Nice.
it's all about what thing kind of hits next. I have I have a like a UFO chase movie that I have a script out right now that we're hopefully going to, hopefully something with that goes. Christmas horror film.
Oh yes. Oh my
A
God.
creature flick that could go very soon, and possibly we'll see. Maybe there's a horror film that I want to take place inside of an old department store. So we'll see how it all goes. But those are some ones that right now are kind of like bubbling up, and hopefully in the not so far future we can have those to chat about.
Man, yeah, that would be absolutely awesome. All those sound so cool, and I think everybody in the horror community can agree that holiday horror movies there's certainly not enough of. So that's those are all cool, really cool sounding things. But I mean, as far as whatever the future brings, I'm excited to see. You do some really, really cool stuff, and I have appreciated both of the times that I've had with you, and I thank you very much for that, man.
Well, yeah, no, and I love doing this. It's so fun because it's so loose and free, and we're just kind of, it's just a conversation. It's just
Yeah.
two guys that like movies, talking about movies, and that's the best way to do it.
No, totally, totally. All right, let me ask you as far as something in the '90s. So this is the finale. I was trying to think of your work with the sound department, scoring. You being a director now, making movies, different things. In the '90s, there was a movie called Judgment Night. Do you remember that one?
Judgment Night.
So it had a soundtrack where it basically had metal and rock and roll bands blending with hip hop artists, and the whole soundtrack was like Slayer with Ice-T, and it was insane. Do you remember
I
that by chance?
No, I don't. I've never seen
Oh,
it.
Man, I don't know if it was like 95, 96.
Okay.
I'd have to go and look back, but the movie was cool, but the soundtrack was insane. It had, oh my God, I'm trying to think of all the bands now. It was like Helmet with like,
Oh my God.
oh man, it was so cool. The soundtrack was what was notorious about it. Anyway, so if today, if you were, your next movie, you were to create a soundtrack and you could have any one metal or rock and roll band blended with a hip hop or rap R&B artist, who would you have combined for this soundtrack? I would ask for a whole soundtrack, but I'm not. That's going to be too much time.
Oh my
Who the
gosh.
first band? Just a genre blend. What would you do?
I would have to say I would have to do something like I want to go something kind of like I want to do something rockabilly ish. Maybe like gosh, it's like I almost want to look at my vinyls upstairs because like there's so many things, but like it'd be interesting to do like this is tough, man. This is a let's see.
So let's say you have some bluesy records. You have some artists, maybe even that you could combine their vocals to a rock and roll band playing. What's a rock and roll or a metal band that comes to mind that you love? Maybe this is making it harder.
No, I know. Well, gosh, I love like. Okay, so I do. It would be fun to do like some sort of like a rockabilly, like something like a what's his name, McPherson,
Mm.
J
Um,
JP or was it JP McPherson or can't remember. I can't remember his full name, but like
I know what you're
um
talking about.
yeah but like if like he was to like team up with somebody like Rob Zombie or something like that, where like Rob Zombie
Oh
already's got like a
yeah,
funk kind of like thing going on, but like you made it more kind of like 50s rock and roll, but it had this sort of like gnarly, like, um, you know, um, psycho rock kind of vibe like behind it. Like that would be super cool, I think, to like to blend something like that, to blend those two kinds of guys together.
I
Um,
love that.
in terms of like, just trying to think in terms of like
Something
the
that came to my mind is just thinking like the 50s and kind of the feel that you have, and having somebody like old like Ice-T or like Busta Rhymes over like an old Richie Valens track.
Oh my gosh, that would be wild,
The
man.
Big Bopper.
Yes, yes. Oh man, I mean, what would be really cool is to do something like okay, so I really like Cypress Hill.
Oh
Is to
yes.
do
Okay.
something like do kind of like a cool like because they often bring in those kinds of samples,
Mm-hmm.
in their back. Like, I mean, I know a lot of hip hop groups do that, but like theirs are for some reason they're very memorable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if you were able to like, cause they already kind of did that. They kind of blended like the rap superstar, rock superstar thing,
Mm-hmm.
back in the day.
Yeah.
But if you were to like,
They were on Judgment Night. I
oh,
can't remember who they were with, but they were on it.
that would be a really fun. I would love I mean, just to to create a song featuring Cypress Hill with maybe like an old 50s track would be really, really cool. And like, I mean, gosh, could you blend the four together? Could you like Cypress Hill, JP McPherson, Rob Zombie, and like an old like 50s doo-wop track together?
Oh,
Oh my
dude.
God. Like it would, I don't even know how that
Done
would
deal.
necessarily sound, but I'm kind of into that. Like, I think that's what I'd want to do.
I love that. I love that. I'm not going to stretch it anymore. Let's leave that there. That is absolutely amazing. That's a great answer. I love it, man.
Okay.
So sick. Insane, but I love it. Look,
Yeah.
all right. I appreciate it. This has been absolutely awesome. Once again, I look forward to all your stuff. I appreciate your time. This has been incredible. This will be edited and on my channel late this next week here, and so I'll send you a link and I'll have that up and be promoting that once again. But thank you for all that you do for us horror fans and all the great stuff you're putting on. And I am really looking forward to what you have in the making, my man.
Oh man, yeah, I can't wait to come back and talk more movies, man. It's gonna be
Totally.
great.
Totally. All right. Lo-Fi Horror Guy, my dude, Mike P. Nelson. Check out Wrong Turn. Check out the Domestics if you haven't. You got that one there. You got Wrong Turn out now at Best Buy, all sorts of stores, online. Check them out. Thank you,
Take it
buddy.
easy,
Take
man.
care. Stay
Yep,
safe.
bye-bye.
He's a lo-fi horror guy. Yeah, he's kind of a guy, but he is so lo-fi a horror guy. Yeah. Lo-fi horror guy has been recorded in front of a live studio audience.